why don't we bring our next guest, who's Professor Amir Fleischmann from University of Michigan, and with the leader in the graduate employees organization, which is a union. They've been very, very concerned about public safety and not entirely happy with the safety that's been provided. Is that a fair characterization, Professor?
That may even be an understatement. Yeah, so last week and I guess the week and a half prior, graduate students at the University of Michigan were on strike over the university's reopening plans, calling for more robust testing, the unconditional option for graduate student workers to teach remotely, and for some additional support for international students and parents and caregivers, as well as a series of anti-policing demands that we saw as incredibly important in the context both of the pandemic itself and the uprisings for racial justice occurring across the country this summer.
So Amir, can you tell us a little bit about what a safe and just pandemic response looks like? So that was one of the demands, right, of the strike. Like, does that include diverting funds from one place to another? Does it look like not reopening? Does it look like, all virtual classes? Like, what does that really look like?
Yeah, so that's a term that we sort of use to encapsulate all the different aspects of our demands. I think it has a few different parts. So GEO, my union, doesn't have a position on whether there should be in-person learning. But if there is, it needs to be done safely. So that's one of the things we were demanding, that the university have a sufficient testing policy that in-person learning is possible. But we also want to make sure that all the different groups on campus who are differently affected by the pandemic are treated fairly by the university and allowed, or the conditions are created so that they can thrive in the campus when it's reopened. So I mentioned parents and caregivers as one group who we were advocating for. So the University of Michigan's in Ann Arbor, and in Ann Arbor this term, all public schools are going to be online. So parents, and many of whom are grad students, need to have additional childcare because their children are going to be at home all day, and now they're working from home. So one of the things we were fighting for was for the age limit for the childcare subsidy that we have won through our contract negotiation to be raised, because it used to apply only to children who were, before school age. So if you were a school age child, you wouldn't be eligible for it. But because now, 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, whatever, are now going to be at home, they are going to require childcare too. So through our labor action, we were able to raise that limit for the length of the pandemic to 15 years old, which was a huge victory for us. I'll also add that, of course, this childcare issue is a gendered issue. So this affects women graduate students more than male graduate students, who are more burdened with the issues of childcare. So that was just one aspect. Our policing demands we see as inseparable from our pandemic-related demands. So there are two reasons for that. One is that when other comparable institutions like the University of Minnesota were ending ties with local law enforcement agencies, the University of Michigan was using the pandemic as an excuse to actually expand cooperation with law enforcement. So they did this through this so-called Michigan Ambassadors Program, where they were essentially empowering community members to act as vigilantes in reporting people who were violating social distance to the police. And through the work of some undergraduate groups on campus, the Students of Color Liberation Front, they've actually ended this program because it's just so out of whack with what we know about how the police would handle these issues. I'll also add that the policing demands, like the pandemic demands, are come out of the knowledge that both the pandemic and racist policing disproportionately affect the most vulnerable members of our community, particularly people of color.